Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into a really fascinating set of source documents that outline a completely alternative legal and administrative framework. It's known as the State Jural Assembly. Since you already know the ins and outs of standard court procedures and juries, we're going to focus on how this specific parallel system functions differently. We'll be looking closely at its unique interpretations of law, its distinct court processes, and, crucially, the essential administrative roles that keep the whole thing running, especially the absolute pivotal role of the court clerk. So let's just jump right in.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll cover 1. The Jural Assembly Framework, 2. Land versus sea jurisdiction, 3. The Assembly Court Process, 4. Court Clerks and Bondsmen, 5. Record Keepers and Notaries, and 6. The Assembly Coroner.
All right, starting with Section 1, the Jural Assembly Framework.
So, according to the text we're analyzing, a state jural assembly is essentially an alternative administrative body. It's described as operating strictly on land and soil jurisdiction under what the documents call American public law. The sources really emphasize that this framework is entirely distinct and separate from our standard mainstream legal systems, which the text actually categorizes as corporate or commercial. To represent this jurisdiction, the documents use a very specific visual anchor. You'll see it referred to as the United States Civil Flag of Peacetime, the one with the vertical stripes. The sources use this flag to signify that they are operating under a peacetime, land-based jurisdiction rather than a wartime or maritime one. It's a huge visual distinction for them.
Moving on to Section 2, Land versus Sea Jurisdiction.
The documents outline a super strict divide here. It's like two completely separate worlds. On one side, you have land and soil jurisdiction. The text aligns this with American common law and natural, living people. On the flip side is sea jurisdiction. The sources equate this with maritime or municipal law, which they say applies to corporations, trusts, and what they term foreign franchises. The entire administrative framework is built on this premise of separating natural people from corporate entities.
This quote really hits the nail on the head regarding how the text flips mainstream legal perspectives. They call it the federal mirror. The text states, "Our public is their private," and vice versa. It claims that while standard courts view the federal constitution as the law of the land, the Jural Assembly views it as the law of the sea. Basically, an agreement dictating how foreign corporate entities must operate when interacting with the people on the land.
Now, you might be wondering, how do they actually distinguish between these two worlds in everyday practice? Well, according to the documents, it literally all comes down to document management and how your name is formatted. A name typed in standard uppercase and lowercase letters, like a regular John Doe, signifies a living person operating under land jurisdiction. But a name typed in all caps, like John Doe, on a standard court document or utility bill is said to represent a corporate fiction operating under maritime law.
Next up, Section 3, the Assembly Court Process.
The text outlines what it calls a living court process, and it's highly structured. Assuming you're familiar with standard trial procedures, here's how this varies. First, a marshal at arms physically secures the building. Then, the claimant presents the recorded facts and evidence. The burden of proof is entirely on them. Next, the accused gets the floor to testify. Finally, the jury retreats to deliberate.
What's really crucial here is how the rules of this common law court differ from the mainstream. The text lists very specific requirements. Nobody can even be summoned without a grand jury presentment. There must be an actual identifiable injured party, which means absolutely no victimless crimes. And the biggest difference? The jury makes all the decisions regarding both fact and law. The justice of the peace doesn't rule on evidence. Their sole job is just to facilitate the process and keep things fair.
This brings us to Section 4. Court clerks and bondsmen. This is where the real administrative heavy lifting happens.
In this parallel system, the court clerk is literally the absolute gatekeeper. According to the text, the very first duty of a court clerk is to handle initial case filing procedures and determine if a case actually belongs in their jurisdiction. They do this by verifying if the individuals involved are members of the State Jural Assembly. If someone tries to approach the court acting as a foreign person or representing a corporate entity, the clerk has to turn them away. They are the ones setting the venue.
The administrative responsibilities here are absolutely vast. The clerk, who is an elected state citizen, handles all the scheduling and notices, assigns a justice to the case, and maintains meticulous court records.
And the text makes a really specific point regarding best practices for court administration. Land and soil jurisdiction courts keep records, whereas sea jurisdiction courts keep files. The clerk must be deeply studied in due process, super organized, and mathematically competent to handle things like bonding fees.
Working right alongside the clerk is the bondsman. While the clerk manages the paper trail, the bondsman handles physical and procedural security. It's a key partnership. The bondsman confirms with the clerk that all evidence tracking is properly recorded. Then, during deliberations, the bondsman isolates the jury, ensures they have access to the evidence, and acts as their single point of contact to prevent any outside interference.
Okay, Section 5, Record Keepers and Notaries.
The record keeper takes on a massive public records responsibility. The text states they safeguard documents not just for current use, but literally for historians of the future. They manage the retention of both paper and digital copies of political status corrections, baby deeds, and meeting minutes. They have to maintain 2 copies of everything, one at the county level, one at the state level, and store them securely in fireproof cabinets.
Because of how critical this record retention is, the text outlines very practical, everyday traits for the selected role. A record keeper has to be exceptionally trustworthy, highly organized, and honestly someone who doesn't mind lots of filing. They also need the actual physical space in their home or office to securely house a growing number of those fireproof cabinets.
Then we have the Jural Assembly Public Notary. The source material places a surprisingly high value on this role. In fact, the text explicitly claims that these public notaries carry more power and hold a higher office than the chief justices of the corporate state system. Together with the record keepers, notaries are the ones who officially affirm political status and authenticate the documents that allow the entire assembly to even function.
Finally, Section 6, the Assembly Coroner.
In the Jural Assembly, the coroner is an elected state citizen whose main job is to officially determine the health, life, or death status of a man or woman. What's particularly unique here is that the text specifies they don't just need traditional medical training. Holistic training is perfectly acceptable for this role too.
The qualifications listed for the coroner are highly specific and very personal. Beyond just keeping detailed records and being a good communicator, a coroner has to be compassionate, calm in emergencies, open to the opinions of others, and, as the text bluntly puts it, not afraid of blood or death.
To bring it all together, these source documents paint a vivid picture of a parallel administrative system that relies completely on very specific, deeply defined roles. From the coroner assessing life status to the record keeper preserving history, every single part is designed to support their unique interpretation of common law. But perhaps nowhere is this more evident than in how they manage their courts and documentation.
This leaves us with a fascinating question to consider. Regardless of mainstream legal consensus, why do alternative administrative structures like the Jural Assembly appeal so strongly to certain groups? What does the meticulous creation of these parallel courts and clerk systems reveal about differing interpretations of constitutional history and personal sovereignty? It's a complex topic that certainly challenges our conventional understanding of law. But ultimately, as we've seen throughout this explainer, a skilled court clerk provides the administrative foundation that allows courts, juries, and public records to function accurately and efficiently.